That's what Apple does, by the way. From your Apple Watch to your AirPods to your phone, I mean, it's so synchronized in such a beautiful way that if you were to think of migrating from one OS to another, you're like, you know what, it's not worth the effort.
It's not,
So for those people that are not familiar with the Kenya schooling system, Strathmore is really up there.
You know, even when you look at our buildings, we no longer have beautiful architecture. Starting a business with friends is a dumb idea.
Oh yeah, I've learned that.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Would you agree with the term that Kenya is considered the Silicon Savannah?
Yeah, I would largely agree with that, with that statement. Kenya has historically punched above its weight.
Yes.
When it comes to technology, though I think, you know, there's a Professor Tim Wise who wrote a book on like the history of tech in Kenya. The history goes way back. You know, the part that's publicly told generally starts around 2009, 2010. But the history goes back to, you know, university professors getting in computers in Kenya in the 80s. Computer science became a huge university subject in the 80s and 90s. Schools got their computer science curriculum in 1995.
Really? That early?
Yeah. In fact, a mutual friend or associate was partially responsible for that.
Okay.
So by the time we're getting into the noughties, you have high school students who've been learning basic computer science from around 1995, when it was examinable in KCSE, going into the market. And this was the first schools to offer it was Strathmore, Alliance, Tarahe, and a few others. But those were the ones who were sort of involved in the curriculum at the time. And then the universities, Strathmore University, Nairobi University, most famously Jomo Kenyatta University, had very good programs. And that talent seeped into the local ecosystem. And so in terms of internet connectivity, we have more ISPs than, I think, every country other than South Africa.
I think 250 plus registered ISPs.
Yeah.
Correct.
We have, you know, when it comes to capital, considering our population and GDP, we recently matched or was slightly below or slightly above Nigeria, which has, you know...
200 plus million people.
Yeah. And then Africa's highest GDP, adjusted for purchasing power parity. And then just the sophistication of many of the farms that are in this part of the world is significantly higher than in other parts of the continent. So I'd agree with it. We punch above our weight compared to our compatriots.
I appreciate that answer. Yeah. That's a good way to start off this segment.
Yes.
Faris, welcome to Coffee Pump.
Thank you for having me.
I think it's a bit of, how do I say, off the reservation topic, having someone from tech. And before I let you get into yourself, I know the Coffee Pump podcast has had folks from cars, fitness, all sorts of walks of life, but our day-to-day jobs are involved in the tech industry. And I thought, you know what, it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. Why not get someone who I would consider the guru in an industry where cloud, tech, everything is sort of going towards a positive trajectory. Why don't you introduce yourself, Faris? Who are you? Give us a bit of maybe like a 60-second rundown on who Faris is.
Yeah, so I'm a technologist, effectively, at heart. I have been in the technology space formally employed for the last 20 years. Since 2004 is when I held my first formal job.
How old were you?
I was 18.
So you started working when you were 18?
Yeah, pretty much a week after finishing my high school exams. I was hired by the school to assist with exams and things like that.
Yeah.
And then in the cloud computing field for 19 years. I first started playing around with virtualization in 2005. It has a very unfortunate beginning. Like the two topics in my life which are very sad sort of origins are virtualization and coffee. But
would you like to expand on that?
Well, we had a computer in 2003, and I was very interested in Linux as a...
First, if you could just keep this here,
yeah? Yeah, as an operating system.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were... The whole idea at the time was to dual boot your computer. But I was not very experienced. I was a high school student. And at the time, my mom was working on her thesis,
Yes.
and it was on that computer.
Okay.
And I sort of bungled it, and we had to rewrite the thesis. And then she passed away like 2 weeks after that. And so, like, out of some trauma, actually, I was like, okay, I'm not touching Linux, I'm not touching anything. And then, I stopped tinkering with Linux. But we managed to submit the thesis anyway. The institution accepted it anyway, so there was a whole thing about that at the time. And then my love for coffee originated from my grandmother's passing a few months later, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and one of my dad's friends brought, I think, 6 or 8 kilos of coffee to the house. And, the house was smelling of very good coffee all day. And now I just started consuming coffee every single day. And that was where the love of coffee was born from. It was like a very weird, sad situation. And then a few months later...
They're both correlated then.
Yeah. And then a few months later, I think January 2005, was a guy called Mike Kwatampora, Ugandan fellow, very smart. And so we were chatting because he was passionate about FreeBSD and the BSD distribution. And I told him, look, I stopped doing this. And he's like, no. There's this thing called VMware. You should get into virtualization, and you'll be able to run your BSD and any other Unix environment you want on your main Windows PC, and your Windows PC remains a Windows PC. And that's a career I was born.
So maybe you could explain that for those people that don't understand the vernacular in which we're talking about. If you dumb it down, what he did was he booted your OS to run on something completely different.
No, so the way it works is, there's Mark Andreessen, sort of, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. Mark Andreessen had this bit on software is eating the world. And when you think about your computer and your phone or any other device, it's software driven.
Correct.
And we get so married to the idea of one application or one operating system per device that we don't realize it's just software. So you have a Mac laptop right now. Up until 2021, Mac laptops were running Intel chips. What that meant was the laptop could run Mac OS, it could run Windows, it could run Linux.
Yes.
Because the underlying, so to just oversimplify it, the Intel CPU does not know what operating system to expect.
Okay.
So it just knows, if you send instructions built for it, it'll execute them. When you have a laptop, it doesn't expect Windows or Linux or BSD or what. It's your operating system when you're installing will probe for the hardware, and then...
It's neutral.
It's neutral.
Yeah.
And so effectively what VMware did was emulate a PC, because, the operating system itself does not know whether to expect an AMD processor, Intel processor, or what have you. So it emulates it. So you install the software on your laptop, and then you mount the installation disk on that application you've installed.
Interesting.
And then it emulates hardware.
Okay.
So the operating system asks for memory. It's told, okay, here's my memory.
Yeah.
Here's my hard disk. But all of that is just a set of files. And that logic is the foundation of cloud computing, effectively. Because you've reduced a computer to a set of files, and what you can do with it is limitless.
So the way you're describing it, you like customizing, you like having options, yet I know you to be a MacBook user.
Yes.
So if I were to ask you, let's say, and you've got an iPhone on the table too, and I do, but there's the whole discussion between Android and MacBook. As someone who's now heavily based in the tech industry, for professional work, what would you sort of align with? Or is it not one, how do I say, you're not fixated on just having one, you'd rather be agnostic?
So there's a story behind my adoption of Macs and
Okay.
iPhones. It was not by default. So I have used a variety of Linux distributions. I have implemented, I remember in 2007, there was an organization, because then, I don't know, people don't remember, but Microsoft was huge on raids at the time in Kenya. And so if you didn't have genuine software,
licensing,
like they'd come with the police and, you'd have to either pay them or install genuine Windows. And so this organization got hit and wanted to move to Linux. And now we had to figure out cost-effective distribution to install across the board.
Whoa.
I'm going somewhere with this story. So we initially did Ubuntu, then we did Linux Mint, and we did variations of SUSE. One of the funny things I experienced from that whole project was that users like silly things working, and they'll never complain directly about what is not working for them. So I remember in one particular case, somebody was complaining that this operating system doesn't work for them. And the further we dug, we were like, nothing seems to be broken. Then we realized that because of digital rights management, they couldn't watch their movies or play their music on that computer.
That's DRM,
anymore.
right? Yeah. Yes. In fact, I think consoles had something of the sort.
Yeah. So you can't play your music. So this operating system sucks. But I won't tell you that the operating system sucks. So I'll just break it and break it and break it. So that's why we landed on Linux Mint, because you could at least have some of these codecs on Linux Mint and all of this. So we deployed it. What I realized is there's a trade-off between time and money. So when you're running your Linux environment, which I ran up until I think 2010, 2011, it's very good, but you run into, it's a fixer-upper. You have to sort of do this. And you've had many car people here. Your project car is not what you're going to use if you're an Uber driver, like just as a very basic example.
Yeah.
If you're a car person and you happen to double up as a driver, the car you drive on a daily basis has to be reliable. You can't be tinkering with it.
Correct.
But your passion project, can keep being your passion project. And I was conflating the role of my PC as a passion project with the role of my PC as a tool of work. And so at some point, I was one of the early adopters in Android. I think I got my first Android phone in 2009 or early 2010. And one day I was going for a funeral, and I can't remember exactly what happened. All I remember was I think we got the site, because it was a time when you drew a pattern. I don't know if that's still the case.
What do you mean? Like on the
To
phone?
unlock the phone, you sort of had the pattern.
Yes, like a passcode pattern. Yeah.
And I think somebody tried the wrong pattern twice, and the phone was wiped, and it wiped my contact on Google as well. And I was just like, you know what? Whatever is going on with Android, I am not interested. I tried an iPhone in 2009, and the iPhone at the time was not mature. I couldn't get it had weird issues, so I got rid of the iPhone then. Then after the Android failed, I moved to a BlackBerry.
Yes, I used a BlackBerry quite.
BlackBerries were rock solid.
So good.
And then iPhone was sort of ready for enterprise a year later.
Yeah.
So I went and got the iPhone 4, I believe. This is in 2012, thereabouts.
Yeah.
It was an old iPhone 4, if I'm not wrong. It was a used iPhone 4. Then ever since, I just stuck to a pattern of buying used iPhones until 2019, where I bought my first new XR. And then this I bought in 2022. And it was the same thing for the laptop.
Yeah.
I go to present something, I'm working in a sales-oriented role, my laptop starts acting out. And I remember my boss asking me, we pay you. We don't pay you to play around with this device. You're sort of paid to present and to...
Correct.
And so there's a whole other story behind how I got the Mac, but I got my first Mac in 2011.
You convinced me to move over to
Mac.
Yeah. And I think the reason is that PC versus Mac argument, you can get a very highly spec'd out laptop, right? And then you have the M2 MacBook. Eventually, over time, the PC somehow degrades. And I want to understand the logic behind that. But then what genuinely shocked me was, first of all, your battery life on your Mac, which is how many years old now?
My Mac is 3-4 years old now.
It's still giving you 8+ hours of life. And the other thing that surprised me was you had 1,400 tabs open.
Yes.
I don't know why you have 1,400 tabs open, but your laptop was still kicking and it was just processing stuff.
Yeah.
My PC would just kwama.
So this sort of goes back to the thing about me is I have ADHD. And so some of those tabs have been open since 2017
Really?
through different laptops.
Whoa.
And so the reason why I am pro Mac is it's a controlled environment.
Yes.
They control the hardware and the software. And you sort of, whenever I've been migrating, everything, including my tabs and the Windows, everything just migrates as is. I remember I was in the US, I think in 2019, and I was doing a trading for my phone. So I was giving them my old phone. They gave me store discounts and the new phone. And I just put the two phones next to each other.
And it synced.
And was fiddling around the Apple store. Data transferred to the new phone, turned it on, plugged in the SIM card, all my messages, everything was there, handed in the old one, walked out of the store.
Do you have that on Android?
No, they're getting there.
They're getting there.
Yeah.
They're getting there. Hey.
So the thing is, a lot of these features are no longer as exclusive to Apple. But what makes Apple simple is that you never have to think about them.
Correct.
So like the problem with Windows is not really the operating system. That's really never been the problem. And this is sort of something VMware figured out. But Microsoft really never had the power to flex, to solve. It's the fact that your partners, your hardware ecosystem partners, can make decisions that are suboptimal for you as the operating system vendor, but you can't twist them.
Okay.
So what will happen is, as a vendor, as let's say I'm HP or Dell or what have you, I will use subpar parts in the laptop. So I'll use some very random wireless. So like
to save on costs, I guess.
I was once helping a friend whose wireless chip couldn't handle a certain spectrum of Wi-Fi. And so, I was telling them, you're basically stuck.
Correct.
You have to replace this. The sort of disk to use, the processor type. And so what happens is that with Apple, they know exactly what they're supporting. They're supporting X number of chips. With Windows, it's significantly more varied. And many times what will happen is the vendor will choose an entry-level i5, because even within the i5 sector, the different performance levels, the i7, the i9, or the Celeron. And you basically choose the one that's optimal for you, the one that's cheapest for you.
Right.
And because I never had that experience with my Intel-based Macs. I bought a MacBook Pro 2011 November, I believe, or sometime 2011, also from Elite, I believe, or something, one of those shops. I gave that laptop to my brother, and it started acting out. It was in use until 2019.
Okay.
I then got a MacBook Pro that I traded in for a MacBook, the 12-inch MacBook. I kept the 12-inch MacBook, which had an i5 processor. So many of those tabs were actually in that Intel-based.
So you just carried everything forward.
Yeah. I had that MacBook from 2016 to 2021. Yeah, to 2021. Then I've had the MacBook Air from 2021 to date. So even the entry-level Intel-based Macs, you sort of control the environment and the quality of the chip. And when the machine could no longer handle upgrades, or sort of forced to also upgrade. So the problem is, if you look at like ThinkPads and other well-built machines, they don't sort of wither.
Right.
And so if there's a whole market right now where people import used ThinkPads, used Dell Latitudes, or whatever the equivalent is today, I've lost track. And they resell them locally, and those laptops get another 3-4 years of use. So it's typically, the companies that go for the parts bin and the ones that sort of build reliable machines. So in my case, my issue with Macs, with Windows at the time, was security. Back then, you were being hit by viruses every other day. There were weird issues.
It was pretty terrible.
So I just moved to Mac for that reason. Then once I got the iPhone, I just got caught up in the ecosystem. And now the amount of friction required to move is just too much.
That's what Apple does, by the way. From your Apple Watch to your AirPods to your phone. I mean, it's so synchronized in such a beautiful way that if you were to think of migrating from one OS to another, you're like, you know what, it's not worth the effort.
It's not, yeah.
And these things genuinely last very long. So
Yeah.
they give you plenty of they give you plenty of life.
Yeah.
I know we've sort of gone
Off.
off tangent. Let's bring us back in. I want to know about you growing up in Kenya. Tell me about your early days, your high school. Because from what I understand is as soon as you finished high school, you got a job.
Yeah.
Where did you go to high school? What was your upbringing like in Nairobi? Or was it in Nairobi?
It was in Nairobi.
Okay. You're born Tao, eh?
Yeah, like my life was on both ends of James Gishuru.
Okay.
I spent, I think, not wealthy by any standard. My dad taught in Nairobi school from 1976 to 1990.
Okay.
So, I was born in Mpisha and went to Nairobi school.
Yeah.
Where I lived until 1990, where he was transferred to Kenya Science Teachers College, which is on the other end, where Nakuma Junction is. Oh, sort of like the first 20-odd years of my life, 20-something years of my life.
Which school did you go to again?
No, this is now where we lived.
Okay.
So I went to Lavington Primary School,
Okay.
and then Strathmore School.
Strathmore, you went for high school.
Yeah.
So you're a chop. So for those people that are not familiar with the Kenya schooling system, Strathmore is really up there in terms of...
Yeah, but I was struggling at the time. Puberty hit me hard, I'd say. I was not proud of the grades that I got to get into Strathmore. And even in Strathmore, I'd switched off. I was not studying.
Was it just a phase or?
It was a phase, and this sort of ties to my upbringing. My parents were both educators. And so I topped my class in primary school. I think I even topped one of these divisional district things at some point. Because I remember, I think when I was 10, I won some award. It was a trip to somewhere. I think the problem is the pressure is relentless.
Oh, yeah.
So, I remember I get 96 on a paper, and so it's not the 96 that's good. It's what's these 4 marks you missed, what was going on. And so when I hit puberty, I was like, you know what, you guys, I am a problem-free kid, and you guys are still stressing me. I just stopped studying. I never really got my act together until 4th form when I realized it was my own life I was squandering. Like, I might have my issues with my parents and how they're bringing me up, but ultimately it's my life.
Right.
And the outcomes from my KCSE determine the rest of my life. But it was interesting. So it was a very academic background. Spent a lot of time in the college library. Learned how to play instruments.
What instruments do you play?
Well, the first one was the most annoying instrument, which I don't understand why any self-respecting parent will get for their kid, which is a recorder.
Is it the flute?
Yeah, it's like it's. But my mom used to play the flute, like the actual flute.
What's that place where everyone used to go and buy books?
TBC.
Yes, they even used to sell flutes.
Yeah, that's how we got them. Yeah. So my mom used to play the flute. No, there's an actual flute, and then there's the recorder. So she was pushing us to study music. So then after that, I got into piano. I think I got to grade 5 in grade 8 theory. Then, because my grades weren't good in high school, I was yanked out of playing piano.
And put back into studies.
I never actually studied, but...
Yeah.
That was my upbringing. Primary school was primary school, high school. We had a teacher who is an associate, Aaron, who was, at the time, my high school teacher. He was one of the people who came up with the curriculum in 1995.
This is Aaron from
Dataposit.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yes.
So that's how I got into tech, really.
Okay, so you finished high school?
I finished primary school.
You finished primary
Then I
school?
go to high school, and he's my computer studies teacher and class teacher.
So Aaron was in Strathmore at the time?
Yeah, he's an old boy of Strathmore. He finished, I think, in 86, and then
Interesting.
came back to teach in the school.
Okay.
And this is before he started Dataposit. So our careers have had quite a significant amount of overlap.
Okay.
So then he hired me as an assistant teacher in the school when I finished high school.
Right.
So I was like
your first job was then at Strathmore?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was sysadmin, printer is not working, go sort it out. I was very poor at marking papers, so I was...
How old were you at that time?
I was 18, I was just done with high school.
Interesting.
Turned 19 that year. It was straightforward. So this is now also when I'm busy losing people's thesis. So I worked there for a year, but it was a really, really difficult year because there was a lot going on.
In your personal life?
No, there was personal life, but there was like, I think there were like a couple of power surges, all the computers in the lab were blown up, then there was like a theft incident, being stolen. Like there was a lot going on that year.
You were dealing with a lot, yeah.
So by the time we got to September, I was like, you know what, let me just go home. And then I had not done that well in KCSE, but I had not done badly. So I was called to do, I think it was industrial chemistry in Kenyatta University, which is a very funny story. But
so did you select it, or how?
No, I selected it.
Okay.
Again, parental pressure. I never really wanted to do it, but my dad was a believer in sciences.
Did you know what you wanted to do at the time? Like, was there something you wanted to do that you couldn't speak freely to your parents about?
Yeah, like I was interested in law, but my mother was vehemently against my studying of the law.
Why do you think so?
I'm not sure I can give the reason publicly, but she was just...
Did she say lawyers were liars or something along those lines?
Yeah, something along that line. Yeah.
It's very similar. I mean, I really wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I was dissuaded.
Yeah.
You know, I was told, no, the law, leave law. There's too much lying over there.
But really what was happening is I got a job at Brew's house at the time. I think it was in 2005. And that's where I was also tinkering with virtualization and all of that and really goofing off, but also working at the time. Then I reported to Kenyatta University to study industrial chemistry. And I was, at the time, the most disorganized university in this country. It was chaotic. I started the semester, we are doing one unit. Then we were told, no. Like a month in, you're told, no, this unit and your course are not supposed to, you're supposed to be doing this other unit. You change and you start doing the other unit. And then, like, they lost my lab results. Because what had happened was Kenyatta University was aggressively expanding, but the infrastructure had not yet been expanded. So the lab infrastructure was for an education university and not a university now offering engineering, soon to be offering medicine, offering those analytical chemistry, industrial chemistry, all of this. So there was a lot of pressure on that infrastructure and the staff. And so you do your lab and then they lose the results and then they're like, no, you have to retake the unit. And I'm like, why am I retaking this unit? And so the following year I decided, you know what, killing off, this is now 2006. I'm not doing this anymore.
So you dropped out of uni?
No, I didn't. I spent a good amount of time in university, just never studied the same thing. So I wanted to do the music program because I'm like, this is an easy. So I changed my major to economics, math, and music.
Yeah.
Then I got kicked out of the music program because I didn't do music for KCSE. And the dean was very understanding. She's just like, we are sorry without this. And she was frustrated because at the time the university was sort of trying to reduce funding to the music department because of the number of students, but at the same time there are roadblocks. In 2007, I tried changing because I really wanted to study, I think I was studying computer science at the time. So I went to change my major to computer science. And at this point, we are contractors. I was working for Dataposit. I was the first employee Dataposit hired in 2007. And we were doing some work.
So this is all going along?
All of this is going on at the same time.
So Aaron has then left?
Aaron has left Strathmore, started Dataposit, working with Micro. Micro is a supplier to Strathmore.
Dataposit was one of the first IT companies?
Well, the first virtualization companies. Not IT companies, no. First focused on virtualization. They were the first sort of enterprise VMware partner.
Maybe you could explain what virtualization is for...
We covered that at the beginning.
Sorry, actually, we did. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So you can just rewind and you'll get it. So I was doing this while studying, but now I wanted to study computer science. And one of the customers we had at the time was Kenyatta University.
Okay.
And so I had access to the infrastructure. We were deploying Citrix Zen in Kenyatta University, and we were helping them. We never got paid with some backup equipment, backup tips or something. And so I went to try and change my major to computer studies, and I've never forgotten what that dean told me. He said, Kenyatta University is not a public toilet. If you're too stupid for chemistry or economics, it does not mean you should waste our time in computers. And I looked at the guy and I was like, okay, like you can just tell me no.
This is a lecture at Kenyatta University.
This is the dean of computers of the School of Computer Sciences.
And this was 2007.
2007 thereabouts. I am already a contractor within the university.
Yeah.
I am a contractor deploying their systems, and he doesn't know this because they had hired another guy called Andrew or something, who was the head of IT.
Right.
So they are trusting my knowledge to run their tech platforms, but at the same time, I'm too dumb to study those same platforms. And so, but at the same time, the university there were quite a number of strikes at the time. So eventually I decided to move to the Parklands campus and attempt to study BCom. And then, like, by the time I was done in 2009, I was like, I've been in this university for 4 years. Let me just call it quits. So 2009, I had also left Dataposit. I went to work for Westcon.
Okay.
Westcon was the distributor of VMware licenses across the continent.
Quite a large distributor.
Yeah, it's one of the largest distribution firms in the world. Well, they've lost a chunk of their global revenue because they split.
Yeah.
There was Westcon Americas, which I think it's now Tech Data or something. But at the time, I think the annual run rate was something like $4 billion. It still is one of the largest African tech firms because it's South African. And then I did that for 3 years. Had a short stint in media, working for the African Media Initiative. We were running a fund for innovation. So when I realized I do have a short temper at times, quit in 6 months.
Do you want to talk about why you quit? That's a
That's a whole other story. I a lot of these things I look back and I realize there's a lot of immaturity all around. I was barely 25, 26.
That's quite a young age. So from what I'm gathering, if I compare you to, and again, it's not a blanket statement for all people in current ages, but having a first job at 18, balancing between university, hopping through multiple
I didn't balance
jobs.
it. I failed at that.
So eloquently put.
Yeah.
However, what you ended up doing is you sort of running across a lot of different things, balancing a lot of different things. And it's a very young age. I mean, I don't think I had that sort of formal experience till much later in my years, especially within the tech industry.
Yeah.
Maybe a question on that. Given your experience with university, let's say, I know for specialized courses, like if you want to be a medicine, if you want to be a doctor and you're studying medicine, if you want to do law, then you have to go to a certain school or entity that teaches those practices. However, let's just say you want to do business studies or you're not sure what you want to do. Would you really push the university agenda to people now transitioning from high school looking for something to do and they're not really clear on where they want to go in their life? They don't have that purpose or direction.
Yes. One of my biggest regrets is not finishing at the time. I should have studied economics, which is incidentally what I wanted to study, but my dad put some pressure on us to study sciences. But I'd actually just wanted to study BA in Nairobi University.
Okay.
In economics more and move on with my life.
So if it wasn't law, you were looking at economics and...
Yeah, like I was torn. A part of me wanted to do computer science.
Yeah.
Another part of me wanted to do... Because Aaron is a chemical engineer. So there was also that study chemistry or something else and then you can apply.
Yeah.
You can apply it. So my high school chemistry teacher, Dr. Ainsley, and Aaron sort of had given me push to study chemistry. I was not bad at it. Like I was bad at other subjects, but generally math, chemistry, physics, I was okay. I was atrocious. My grades throughout high school in Swahili, biology, geography were chaos. But the thing is, I didn't understand the role an education plays. The idea behind university education is to just help you think, help you learn, and give you a framework for learning in the future. It's a starter. That's why you're told you've been given the power to read and everything that appertains to the degree.
Correct.
Once you have that, you can specialize in what you want. But it's a way of thinking. Lawyers are taught to think in a certain way. The reason why people say they like hiring engineers is because there's a certain approach to problem solving that they get in the university. Doctors, it's the same thing. There's a reason why if you remove a doctor from the university, from the medical profession and set them to another field, they do very well. There is a thoroughness that they learn, and a discipline and an approach to
that they can then
that
apply.
they can then transfer.
Correct.
to.
Yeah.
So that's really the reason why you get an education. So the reason why I am pro art degrees is because we don't have enough thinkers. We have people who build our roads; they're not walkable.
Yes.
We forget our history, and we don't learn from it. You look at some of the issues that the ancient Romans faced. We are facing them on a daily basis here. You look at our politics. We've really just been caught. The land struggle that the nation has faced has sort of been the same throughout the last 120 years. We've never really resolved. Once our land was grabbed by the colonial powers, we never really fully resolved the land issue. We pushed it from one area to another. So you sort of had people from Central who are fighting for their land being moved to the Rift and creating a new problem there. And those people moving outwards and creating new problems in North Rift and in Western Kenya and etc. History teaches you that, how to deal with such issues and why they need to be dealt with. So I'd say, even when you look at our buildings, we no longer have beautiful architecture. When people are building apartments, they all look the same. And many times the function is missing. And so we do have a dearth of art. And
they should heavily push that.
And they should push it. And I think the idea that a university degree begets a career is, apart from the specialized fields, is a bit flawed. Knowledge is useful for its own sake. You don't shower because you're going to meet someone. It's because good personal hygiene is its own reward.
Yes.
And so if you always predicate education on a particular outcome, then you miss the purpose of education.
True. I appreciate that answer. That's actually a very, very good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your personal journey, right? So what we've had is you've transitioned now from university, working jobs.
Yeah.
You've been employed at multiple different industries, working specifically in IT.
Yeah.
When did you realize you wanted to open your own shop? When did you
2005. That's 2005. When I
2005.
wrote the first sort of business plan. That was for a services firm.
So let's go there. I want to understand, when you started your own business, what was the agenda? What was the aspect of that business? And what pushed?
In 2005, it was a thought.
Okay.
It was very clear that IT services was going to grow.
In Kenya?
No, globally.
Globally, correct.
Because the thing is, this economic theory of specialization, we are drinking coffee.
You haven't had a sip of your coffee, by the way.
It's almost done. It's just
really?
You buy the coffee from a coffee farmer, and the coffee farmer is specialized in making the coffee. Bank is focused on transactions and serving the customers. So if you focus on IT services, then many of these companies will have to, as IT gets more complicated, the demand for associated services will accelerate. So that was sort of the first idea I had, wrote a business plan, a bunch of us exchanged emails, never went anywhere. And then AWS had come up, and they kept thinking, because at the time in 2005, the office where I worked was in the same building as the Exchange Point. Bruce House.
The Kenya Internet Exchange Point.
And I had some mischievous periods where I remember taking down a particular ISP because I just discovered BitTorrent and I wanted to download like a bunch of, it was actually Linux images I was downloading for a couple of friends. What was entertaining is those Linux images, if you were downloading them, it was Fedora via torrent, the seeds were insane. So we basically choked one of those ISPs and I got to the office in the morning and the cable had been yanked out. These were shared machines. You could never do anything dodgy.
Yeah.
So that was that. So that was sort of like the idea. Then AWS comes up and we started chatting around 2007. Like maybe we should start a cloud company. But we're not ready.
Were they cloud companies at the time?
There were cloud companies.
Like local cloud companies?
No, locally no.
Yeah.
So then by around 2009, the early formations of cloud companies, there were hosting companies that aside in the early 2000s, the early aughts. But now you're sort of, we don't really remember this period. There were no undersea cables.
Correct. In fact, Seacom didn't land till 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were no undersea cables.
And
So
everything was
satellite.
Satellite, yeah.
And so you needed to have, like, if you needed mail, your mail server was local. Google Apps didn't exist. So a lot of these platforms we take for granted today were once in existence. So a company will get hosting on cPanel that will be hosted by the ISP, and you'd pay for that, and then you'd also pay for your internet. And the internet was expensive because I remember the first project I took
What was the price per meg back then? Oh, it wasn't meg, it was KV.
So December 2003, one of the first projects I took on as an assistant teacher was I was left over the holidays to get the lease line installed. It was 64,000 shillings for 64 kilobits per second.
Jesus, 64,000 bob a month for 64 kilobits.
Kilobits, not bytes. So when you divide that by 8, because 8 bits make a
yeah.
byte, that's 8 kilobytes per second.
When today Safaricom is giving you 40 gigs for 3,000 bob a month.
Yeah. So, so that's sort of where that came from. So the idea was, if you have the cloud locally, guys can run the applications through the exchange point, etc., etc., etc. We visited the exchange point a number of times. And that idea was there. My boss at Westcon had wanted to do that, so I spruced it up, wrote a new business plan, sent it to him.
Yeah.
And then Safaricom was one of my customers, and they bought VMware for their cloud platform. So they were one of the first platforms in Sub-Saharan, actually globally, on vCloud Director, because it had just come out in 2010 when they bought it. And then at the time, I believe Sawa was getting into
Sawa, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, they used to be a web design shop, and then they sort of built out a small cloud. They were sort of like the pioneers in that space. And shortly after that, Gestalt Guild, around 2012.
Yes.
Came into this
Which
space.
is now Sibyl.
Sibyl, yes.
Correct, yeah.
So it was sort of part of the same. And then, but there was nobody sort of doing fully automated cloud. And so that was sort of like the business idea. Came up with the name early 2013, registered the company in 2013. We were the first or second. It was us and RSA Web, Zangani, to sort of launch self-service.
So, I know Angani did something. There was also your company that did.
No, Angani was my company.
Oh, right.
I started
yes.
So it ended badly. Shareholder fights. It was unfortunate. Again, I chalk it up to a lot of immaturity across the board. Like some of the decisions that were made at the time, I look back and I'm like, why were people so quick to go down a certain path?
Correct.
You can always say something you've not said. You can't unsay something you've said.
That's true.
And many times
the tongue can take you to places where you never intended to go.
And the same thing applies with actions.
Yes.
I can't unpunch you. If I've punched you, like I've changed the nature of our relationship.
Correct.
And so when the kerfuffle was escalating, people felt the need to keep raising the stakes. I eventually sold my stock in Angani, I think in 2019. I wrote a very long missive on why people should make peace and go their own way. I think I sent that out to the shareholders in 2018. Took like a year to settle everything, but we settled everything, went our own way.
So if you don't mind, based on the experience you've had now, that was officially your first business you went in, started off.
Started and operated,
Started and operated. Yeah. So what advice would you, given the experience you have, what advice would you give young entrepreneurs looking at starting their own business? And maybe specifically looking at starting their own business in the tech industry in Kenya?
You see, the thing is, I regret not reading. Somebody sent me the book in 2013, or I bought it or something. Founders' Dilemmas by Noam Wasserman. We think we are special. We are not. Most founders succeed in like company number 3 or number 4. We are given the stories of people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. And what has happened is the exception to the rule has been viewed as the rule of thumb.
Which is not the case.
Which is not the case. So, the book Founders' Dilemmas covers this in great detail. The more founders you have, the more likely it is to fall apart. With Angani, we were around 5 of us.
Okay. So it was that Kiswahili saying that translates too many cooks.
Yeah.
Spoil the broth.
So, number one. Number two, the younger you are as an entrepreneur, the more likely it is that things go sideways. I was 27 when we started Angani. So, younger entrepreneurs, there's like a lack of experience, lack of what? Even with board members, etc. The best age to start a company, most high growth companies are started by people over 40. Interestingly enough.
Interesting. I didn't. That's actually.
So, and then.
Is that a stat that you can actually back up?
It's covered in the book.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Harvard Business Review has an entire. Because this guy published a case on it. Starting a business with friends is a dumb idea.
Oh yeah, I've learned that.
Yeah.
I've learned that. Never with friends.
All my businesses were started with friends, and the thing that no Wasserman says is, you start a business with your friends, you'll be left without money and without a business.
But to be honest, it gives you a good insight into what your friends are capable of.
Well, partly yes, but the fundamental problem with starting a business with friendship is actually communication, because you have divergent tensions. You see, if we work together and you're late for a meeting, I'm like, dude, you're wasting my time. I need to go and I'll do something else. I'll give you an example. I was introduced to someone some weeks back. We set up for a meeting. I went to their office, they were not there. I left after 30 minutes and was like, you know what, you're not respecting my time. You have a nice life. And I was out. Because they were not also communicating. So I interpreted that as disrespect. Because if you respected me, you'd actually pick up my calls and tell me what's going on. If we are friends, I'm like, Sajid, there's something going on. Let me forgive him. It doesn't mean that I'm not harboring the resentment.
So you build more calluses towards the relationship.
Yes. So now I'm like, this guy doesn't respect me. But I'm never vocalizing it.
Because you're friends.
Because we are friends and I don't want to. I'm prioritizing the social relationship over the commercial relationship. And so the closer you are, the more goes unsaid. And this that goes unsaid sort of poisons the relationship. And by the time you're coming to a point where you need to resolve that issue, it's nuclear. And people have balkanized. And like in the case of Angani, by the time we were going to the board meeting that had me, I resigned. I felt it was constructive termination. They felt I just quit and took the ball and went home. The relationships had been damaged. Like these are relationships that went back years. North Africa. I mean, I met these guys when I was in high school. So people you've known for 20 plus years. Rights and all communication, criminal court lawyers, that's it. So I'm not the one with the criminal case, my former business partner is. But the relationship completely deteriorated and it was just things going unsaid. Now, I'm not excusing bad behavior, but when you start a business with friends, there's a lot. And then there are assumptions on how you're going to do as a business and how you distribute.
Yeah.
This is like historically in the army, how do you distribute the plunder?
Yes,
Caesar leads
exactly.
a war into, wherever. And how do the army guys get a share of the plunder? That's something else. So you might start a business together and one party might decide that this is no longer of interest to them, but they're still fully vested in the business.
Right. So then how do you deal with
So how do you deal with that? So, and then it's not like the risks go away if you do it with a stranger. But the best people to start businesses with are people who you've worked with in a professional
setting.
And none of my former business partners, other than one, but we were not like completely, we had no real professional overlap.
Okay. Would you ever start business with friends again?
No. I do business with them. But the approach I'm taking now is, let's figure out how we work together, how we distribute things. Sure. Let's work together first and then formalize it.
Sure.
As opposed to the other way around. So that exits, if at all, can be neat. And if we find that we can work well together, then we merge everything.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just more caution than anything else.
No, I think I agree with you on the notion that starting a business with friends can be a bit tricky. To be honest, I've tried things with friends who are no longer friends. It just teaches you it actually shows you the true character of people,
Yeah.
especially when money is involved.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure, someone in my family, whether it's my granddad or my grandmom, used to say that you really get to know a person is A, when you do business with them, and B, when you travel with them. That's when when you spend time outside of the comforts of your meeting times, that you get to know the true characteristics of folks.
And money is not always the sort of like the thing that breaks you. At times it's pride.
Yes.
And I learned painfully that there are people who would rather die than back down from a position, however wrong. Yeah.
And you can't change that.
You can't change that, so you let it be.
Right. So back on the topic of starting a business. Now, raising capital, especially in Kenya, what would you say are the pros and cons? And is it easy to go about that?
So I have thoughts that I'm not sure is will be good to vocalize. But George Akaloff wrote a paper, Market for Lemons, and sort of like it's moved on to what's being described. People have sort of applied it to what's known as economics, where acting suboptimally is viewed as a rational act. In economics, what will happen is if you take your car to Krogon, you don't expect them to tell you that they're going to get a paint calibration machine to fix it. You expect a cheap job done quickly. You hear about paint calibration, you're like, okay, you want to call me, you want to charge me too much. It's like a market for mediocrity. I know that's a very, and also like used cars and lemons. So like why used cars get discounted is because, in Kenya we value the plate. So if it's a KDP, I think we are on now, it's a better car than a KCK. For argument's sake, say, even though let's say the KCK was bought around 2016, 2017 from the showroom, and the KDP was also that, but abroad, we discount local usage. We don't know what's been done to the car, the damage the car has, etc. And so we put a discount on those things to account for the potential of losing your hair. What that does is it pulls out the high quality cars, because if I have a high quality car, I'm not going to take it into this market to be discounted. It sort of translates in a not linear way to whole concept of economics, because in economics you only have mediocrity moving around. The reason I'm saying this is we are in a low trust environment with a legal system that's not very effective. And so investors tend to work with either people they know of, people who are, I'd say, come from similar backgrounds to them and have the same social capital to lose. And it's created an inefficient capital market, because you look at some of the companies that have ended up going under recently, they had a lot of capital, and it's because they were safer bets for the investors than some of the other companies that would have done well, but were a bit of a wild card. And so the capital allocation is not linear. But the reason why I'm not losing sleep over this is, in the short run, a market is a voting machine. In the long run, it's a weighing machine. So if you invest in companies that will not necessarily do well because you're looking at all these other factors, as a venture capital fund, you have to return capital to your LPs. And over the long run, you won't return the capital, and it'll be harder and harder for you to raise more capital. People who get the right investing thesis will attract more and more capital, and over the long run will return more capital to the LPs and will generate more capital. Because at the end of the day, Amazon was declared dead in 2000, 2001. It was a Barron's article saying Amazon.toast. Your some of the largest tech firms in the country, including Ikolo, really struggled with capital early on. The companies that have had the largest impact in our ecosystem, many of them did not have any capital.
True.
And so in the long run, if you see the market as a collection of firms trying to grow and capture market share, the capital that comes from abroad is one way of funding it. The other is, loans and revenue from your customers and all of that. People will take various funding strategies. But in the long run, certain firms will do well.
Right.
And those firms will sort of set the precedent. One of the companies I admire the most is Savannah Informatics, started by another schoolmate. If you've ever gone to a hospital and you've seen the biometric reader in the card reader,
yes,
they provide that for most hospitals and work with most insurance firms in the country.
Correct.
They didn't raise a lick of venture capital money, but they've grown as a firm. So the success in the market is more a factor of the founder and determination and all of that. Less capital, but I'm not saying it's not important. It's very important. But if somebody is determined, they will make their way through.
Yeah.
And in the long run, I think there'll be a realignment of a lot of these venture capital firms and also founder strategies to sort of be closer to reality.
Okay. Yeah. Faris, now the other thing I wanted to ask you was, in relation to Kenya, we mentioned about the Silicon Savannah, and in relation to funding of tech startups, do you think there's a very vibrant, dynamic setup of businesses popping up in Kenya specifically versus other East African countries in the tech space specifically?
Yeah. There's, by far, we have more startups here than anywhere else in East Africa. And that's a good thing. People fail. I have failed twice, burnt my fingers, lost a lot of money. But it's experience. It's, sorry.
No problem.
It's experience. It's how I've learned. I've made some friendships. I've learned a lot. The more people try, the more companies we'll have, the more success we'll have.
Yeah.
Obviously, we cannot circumvent environmental issues. But ultimately, the more we try, the more we do, the better we'll be.
With the political situation, with the way globalization is affecting pricing and the market cap in Kenya, does that affect investment opportunities here also?
I don't think globalization and all of that is a significant move. There's an economist, I think he's a Peruvian economist, Fernando de Soto Polar. My pronunciation might be off. He wrote a book, Mystery of Capital, I think, or something. In the book, basically what he does is he goes and tries to formally start a business somewhere in Latin America and follow all of the rules required. And he just realizes that it's impossible to legitimately do business. We need, we follow the letter of and sort of like that book formed the foundation of the Doing Business report that the World Bank started publishing. And we do lip service to we follow the letter of the Doing Business report, but we completely demean the spirit of the Doing Business report. And so we have one of the most complicated tax environments right now to sort of navigate with, if you notice the e-teams thing, there's still a lot of back and forth, lack of clarity, and there's a lot of investment required to comply. And when you're doing business with the council, whichever county council, you have cess moving goods between borders. Like if you're carrying tomatoes, if I'm a farmer in Nyahururu and I want to bring my tomatoes to Nairobi, I'm going to encounter a cess point in Nakuru County and another one in Kiambu County and another one in Nairobi. Why? So it's becoming very difficult to do business, and there's a direct correlation between per capita GDP output per citizen and ease of doing business. So the harder it is and the more regulations you have, you're literally applying brakes on your economy. And if we focused on that, which is something we can control, Kenya does not have a vote in the UN. We are not a global power. we have no influence whatsoever when it comes to matters such as Ukraine or war in the Middle East or global oil prices. What we can control is the productivity of our citizens and how easy it is for them to make money. And that requires an active police force because you need to protect people's property rights. You need to protect the people themselves. You need to have a judiciary, because one of the problems with the legal system that prevents investors from coming here is the fact that dispute resolution is very difficult. So many of the startups that get capital right now are incorporated abroad because the legal system there will deal with disputes in a judicious manner.
True.
But in Kenya, the matter might go on for 10 years. And so if you're investing capital here,
and something of the sort
and then
happens.
something happens that goes sideways, you know that the legal system won't help you. So you're like, okay, let me not. And so individual investors make these decisions quietly. And so what that shows up as is a reduction in the capital invested. Right now, the thing that saved us is diaspora remittances to the country. But when it comes to capital into the country, things like controlled forex environments, policy shock, because in Kenya, we've got very effective policy transmission, but very erratic policy generation, which leads to policy shock. So, you have a policy that, it's legal to do ABCD, the next day it's illegal to do it, and the day after it's legal to do that. You have regulations around like data protection was passed, then you have all these other. I'm not saying they're bad. But the thing is, as a business owner, if I incorporated my business in 2014, I have had to change, I've had to adapt to how taxes are calculated,
True.
to how my relationship with my county, the licensing regulation keeps changing. There was a time, they waived the license fees, even how you interact with the courts, etc. Everything has been evolving in this period. What businesses require is a level of stability. You'd rather have a high tax rate that never changes, because every time you change something, there's a compliance cost.
Correct.
So if you say, oh no, you need to move to system X, there's a compliance cost. And it's like an informal tariff on the business, and they have to get people, and it distracts them. So those are things which, as a nation, we can fix. Have a predictable business environment, have quick dispute resolution mechanisms, have enforced property rights, and largely capital will flow into the country, because people know that if I invest and I lose the money, well and good. But if I get my money, I'll be able to pull it out. So if I invest $1 million into the country, let's say, I won't have a forex shortage at some point when I want to liquidate this investment. Let's say I put my money in real estate. It's unacceptable to have the knowledge to want to liquidate this asset because, it's my money, I want to do whatever. Then I'm told, no, there is a currency crisis. So investors will stop pumping money in. And this is also reflected in our stock market. The stock market is at its lowest point. We need to fix the fundamentals. If we fix the fundamentals, we'll have a larger market to play with. But so long as we are sort of sitting here making excuses for things we will never really be able to control, we will not get out of this situation.
Do you see it improving, though?
I don't know. I don't want to make political statements, but in the long run, it's improving. In the 80s, we had judgments that completely poisoned our jurisprudence, and a judge could wake up and make whatever ruling. So in terms of rule of law, on the aggregate, we're improving. In terms of policy, I am not sure, because the 80s and the 90s were a bit more friendly in terms of policy.
More flexible.
No, but in terms of policy consistency, it was a lot more consistent. Now, today this thing is not tax deductible. Tomorrow, there's a lot of variance. Every time the Finance Act passes, there's like a wild shift in how you deal with the government and taxes, which is well and good. But there's now a cost hidden on the other side. So, and so it's On the policy side, I'm not sure we're improving because there's this need for the last 8 or so years. Recently a livestock bill has been passed. So apparently it's no longer legal to have chicken and goats and
What?
Yeah.
I think
Or they're looking to pass it. Yeah, something that will ban like keeping livestock on your own or keeping like you need a license for chicken or all of these. Then there was a animal feeds rule. Like there are all these very weird.
Do you think these rules are sort of coming about because of the pressure to collect?
Even then, but what you're doing is you're effectively slowing down the economy because you're trying to get more money. And that's hence the reference to Hernando de Soto. You're making it harder to do business. When you make it harder to do business, you collect less money as government.
So then let me ask you this. If you're now someone sitting from an outside perspective, looking to invest in Kenya or looking to invest anywhere in East Africa, would you advise them to invest in Kenya over other countries given whatever we're going through right now?
Yeah, because we're still the largest market. I mean, I am running a business in Kenya.
So short answer is yes, there's still a lot of opportunity over here.
The government just sort of needs to get out of its own way. Because you're spending money, making life harder so that you can collect less money. It's like peeing in your pants to keep warm as a strategy. As in,
Okay, so maybe let's talk about your business now.
Yeah.
You're currently running a cloud virtualization infrastructure as a service company called
pure infrastructure.
Pure Infrastructure. How has the adoption been of cloud in the current market?
We've actually been ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Like the hyperscalers had very early adoption from Kenya. I do take some credit for this. We have quite a number of cloud companies that many of whom have either advised or helped.
Yes, I will compliment you on the fact that when I joined the industry, one of the first persons I was told to meet and take out for a coffee was you if I wanted to learn more about the cloud industry.
Yeah. So, from the early days, like 2010 when Safaricom came into the space, there have been several others. Sibyl were my customers, but I never really had anything to do that cloud. Angani, which I started, North Africa, Dataposit I advised at some point, and the uptake of cloud in Kenya is better than other parts of the region, but I think the opportunity is huge. What people mistake, and one of the things I struggle to communicate to people is there's a lot of complexity in the cloud, and what people are starting to see when they move purely to a hyperscaler is that compliance is not easy, cost control is not easy, and solving for complexity is not easy. So we are more of Tata Consulting or IBM for cloud environments. And so we do have our own environment. We are helping people connect to the hyperscale clouds or any local cloud or local environment, and also integrating that into their core IT platform.
And would it be cheap? Would you then, from a cost perspective, let's say your mom and pop shop, your folks that are just starting up in the BFSI industry, is cloud a cheaper alternative compared to having your own physical infrastructure at a data center?
Well, that's one of these amorphous questions, like how long is a piece of string? It really doesn't have an answer. It's context specific. So, there's the current case that, is being blogged about in the tech space where DHH, who's like the CTO of Basecamp, has saved a fortune by moving away from Amazon to a colo site.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And so when you think about like cloud versus colo versus on-prem, there are several factors to consider. One is skill. Do you have the resources to hire the right skills to run this environment? If you don't, then what you're doing is, because it's not your core business, you're losing money trying to save money. So it's a waste. Your tech platform is not as good, and your core business is suffering as a result. If you have the skills, because there are many companies which, due to historical reasons, actually have the skills required to run these platforms, then colo might make a lot of sense, like banks, for instance.
Right.
Banks have like a compliance
regulation
imperative
perspective that they need to.
And they have like their infrastructure needs to be local, and they have the skills required to do that. Past that, for your small mom and pop shop, it becomes, it's a question of trade-offs. If you can actually become a colo customer, then you're dealing with a very different set of equations. Your small mom and pop shop is not going to be a colo customer. Their workloads are just not that large. But if they are, then now the trade-off is the tax benefits to outsourcing your environment, because the way, capital is a post-profit expense. A lease is pre-profit.
Yes.
In your P&L. So I'm sort of oversimplifying it, but the way to think about it is, if I am to buy servers to put in a colo facility and my annual revenue is, let's say, 10 million shillings, and my profits that year will have been 3 million shillings, and I want to spend 3 million shillings, that 3 million shillings profit will go into the colo site, into paying for colo.
Paying for colo.
Because as far as the government is concerned, this is capex, so it happens after profit. However, if I am leasing, even let's say for 2 million shillings, then so I'll pay 1 million in taxes, and then I'll have to find an extra 1 million shillings to be able to make the 3 million shilling purchase. If I am doing the same thing with a lease, let's say 2 million shillings a year, over a 3-year period, that's 6 million shillings, but the 2 million shillings will hit before the taxes.
Yeah.
So I'll deduct the 2 million shillings. So my net gross profit, my operating profit will be 1 million shillings. Then I'll pay 300,000. So over a 3-year period, the lease option will save me 1.8 million shillings in taxes. The other option will, like, on the sticker price might be lower, but taxes, so you can do a whole ROI calculation where you're considering the opportunity cost of the capital. Because again, 3 million shillings, if you're making, I don't know, if you're selling laptops, what does 3 million shillings invested in more inventory do for your business versus buying equipment to fulfill? So then the question becomes the marginal utility of capital, like what makes the most sense with the capital that you have available for your business. Okay. So it's a very
broad question.
It's a very broad question. And generally we help companies think through it.
Perfect.
Because there are very different parameters. You'll come across a company that's already made the investments. And so in that case, it's okay, how do we help this organization make the most of the investments that they've already made?
Okay.
Like how do we get them the best bang for the buck? And so it's a lot of this is consulting. It's a conversation. It's talking to people, figuring out where they stand, what their finances look like, what they want to spend, and then we can proceed.
Maybe as we go towards the end, cybersecurity is something that's becoming a common vernacular. A lot of people are mentioning it. In Kenya specifically, is cybersecurity a real threat? And the second part of that question, what can folks do from an individual basis, from a business basis, to mitigate the risk of cybersecurity?
So it is, because with all businesses, the attack surface area has significantly increased. I mean, if you went to your average business in the late aughts, like even your supermarkets, each supermarket had its own IT infrastructure, and it was sort of siloed and away from the core infrastructure. Now everything is online. So your average supermarket is connected to Safaricom, because guys are paying by M-Pesa. It's connected to God knows how many point systems. Everything is hyper-connected, which increases the attack surface area. But the thing is, we're not going back to the horse-drawn carriage era. If you really want a secure system, fine, you can go back to a paper-based and carbon copy system. But that's not where we are. People expect convenience. You expect that if you walk into a supermarket today, you can tap your card or you can pay by M-Pesa and you get your products. And if something is wrong, you can get a refund in yet another supermarket. People expect these real-time systems. So it's incumbent on the companies to invest in security. The good thing is it's getting easier and easier to some extent, because with a lot more visibility on attacks, more and more professionals are getting into this space. There are more consulting firms covering security than there's ever been before. So if a company really wants to secure its platforms, there's a lot more knowledge available than there was before. Not saying it's not possible to get hacked. I'm saying you can make it harder, and that's kind of all that's required nowadays. Many of these multinationals have been hit. But remember again that the larger the organization, the bigger a target it is.
Right.
So right now, you go online and the people who leave their CCTV cameras unmarked and public, so you can actually find people who have unguarded cameras where you can actually see the feed. It's just some supermarket somewhere, shop on the side of the road, nobody cares. But you won't find that from, let's say, a telco, which now has to secure because everyone is trying to hit the telco. So yeah, small organizations, less of a target, still need to invest in security. Large organizations, more access to talent to secure, more knowledge on how to secure.
Okay. Are we still recording? We're good. We're good on the angles, yeah? How many minutes do we have? 3. This one, how many minutes do we have? 2.
That one has 6.
Okay, so I think what we can do is we can just continue and we'll wind things down. Future outlook, yeah? Faris, so that's on the cybersecurity front. Now, within the pure infrastructure perspective and what you're doing, what's your future outlook? What are your plans?
So we are rolling out a product, I think, even partially in conjunction with you, where we are interconnecting all the major data centers in the country. And the idea is that if a customer is in one particular site, they can access any content or networking partner within the country. So that's sort of like the short-term thing. In the longer run, we see a lot of opportunity, well, if capital allows, to get into, there's a lot of hype around it, but, the same regulations that prevent banks from holding the data abroad might be useful for us. So we are looking at setting up sort of like a GPU clusters locally for people looking to run ML, AI, or whatever else, and just growing our infrastructure footprint.
Okay.
So I think by the end of the year, we will have infrastructure in 6 data centers in the country.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What about on your personal side? What are the plans now?
I just keep running the business.
Let me ask you this. You're also a good steak. Knowing you for the longest time, you always recommend the best steaks.
Yeah.
For me, who's a non-steak guy, how do I go about preparing the steak? What? Just to end things down, how do I make the perfect steak?
So you can't put lipstick on a pig. If you have a low quality steak,
I like that. Yeah.
it's going to taste horrendous. No amount of seasoning or butter will save it.
Yeah.
So, like, step number 1, get a well done dry aged steak. Kenya, the most, the guys who are doing decent dry aged steaks are at Cafe, who get the steaks from Morendat and Well Hung Butcher. And there's Morendat, is a Well Hung Butcher of Nanyuki, available in Carrefour and Prime Cuts. So they do very good steaks. They're expensive, but they're good. Once you have the right sort of ingredients, just season it basically with salt, if you like pepper, some pepper, butter, oregano, and rosemary and garlic go a long way.
Interesting.
But not like I generally prefer my steaks with nothing but salt. Like, there's some very flavorful steaks that don't even require salt, and the fat of the marbling of the steak is enough to sort of carry it too. So it's just a bit of butter, salt, and that's it. Garlic and rosemary, and that's it.
And you have yours medium well, medium rare?
It depends. It varies between medium rare and medium well. Okay. And medium, so sort of not medium rare and medium.
Yeah. Well, Faris, it's been an interesting conversation, seeing
Thank
your
you.
personal journey
Yeah.
through the tech space, seeing where Kenya is sort of going within the tech sphere. And also, I think we've learned how to make the perfect steak.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic having you on. Any closing remarks? Anything?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm impressed by the growth of your podcast.
I appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll get you back to talk about different things now.
Yeah, I think we can have a long chat about steak and coffee. I have many thoughts on that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. This has been Coffee Pump. We'll catch you on the next episode.